We begin our show with a dangerous new escalation of violence in the Middle East, where the first casualties of U.S. forces have been reported since the Israel-Hamas war began. On Sunday, 3 U.S. service members were killed. At least 34 more were injured in a drone attack. Central Command says the attack happened on a base in northeastern Jordan. It's a logistics base called Tower 22 that's involved in the fight against ISIS. Now, this satellite image provided by Planet Labs PBC shows the base before it was hit. President Biden says the attack was carried out by Iran-backed militias and vowed to respond. Iran has denied involvement. Since the war in Gaza started, U.S. troops have been under attack across the Middle East by various Iran-backed groups who say they're targeting the U.S. for its support of Israel. This violence comes as the UN urges the U.S. and several other countries to reverse their suspension of funds to the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees amid warnings of an imminent famine in Gaza. The countries withdrew funding following allegations by Israel that some of the agency's employees were involved in the Hamas attacks on October 7th. The Palestinian Prime Minister has urged the countries to reconsider.
We were extremely shocked that certain number of countries have decided to suspend its aid or their aid for the UNRWA. The countries that have announced this suspension, their aid amounts to 70% of the annual budget of the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. This measure is extremely dangerous, and it is our hope that it will be reversed.
A lot to cover this morning. In a few moments, we'll hear from the host of Oh My World, Hagar Shamali. But first, let's get to NBC foreign correspondent Matt Bradley and our White House correspondent Monica Alba. Good morning to both of you. Matt, let's start with you. Walk us through what we know about the drone attack right now, where it happened, and how it unfolded.
Yeah, Joe, so what we're talking about, according to the U.S. government, is that this was a one-way drone that struck this facility, as you're describing, not really a base, more like kind of a logistics tower, kind of sitting in the middle of the desert. Wasn't one of the main installations, but it was certainly exposed and kind of a sitting duck, it looks like. Now, we heard from the Jordanian government, and we heard from the U.S. saying that this was in Jordan. The Jordanian government said this was actually over the border in Syria. Now, it sounds as though that's not really the case, because what we got from the U.S. is that it is in Jordan. In any case, this was a major escalation, and one that Iran has basically denied. Now, Iran went so far as to call it a conspiracy to pin attacks like this one on Iran themselves. Now, Joe, do we believe Iran? Hard to know. You know, when we talk about these Iranian groups, Iranian-backed groups, there's a lot of speculation and discussion about the degree to which they are controlled by Iran. Certainly, a lot of them get varying degrees of largesse from Iran. Whether or not Tehran is pulling the strings, that's unclear. And obviously, there's different degrees depending on the group. My understanding from speaking with a lot of Middle East analysts, who, again, don't really know because this is all so opaque, is that these groups are proxies but not puppets. So it's possible that they really are taking decisions on their own, even if they are getting financing, training, weapons and materiel from Iran. They may be making independent decisions, and that may be what happened here. Joe?
So, Monica, we know the president was at a campaign event in South Carolina yesterday when we learned about this. What's been his reaction to this attack? Do we know what kind of response we could see? We know there are some Republicans calling for a very strong response.
Exactly, Joe. And remember, this had sort of been the bar or the marker for a larger response. We know that there have been these many attacks, about 150 or so times, where U.S. personnel or bases or anything related to that were targeted or attacked since the war started on October 7th. But the moment that U.S. troops would be killed in an attack like this, that's something really where it shifts it into a different dimension for the Biden administration and for the president, who did vow yesterday while he was in South Carolina to respond. He didn't want to say in any kind of detail what that may look like. And he was very clear to say in his statement responding to all of this that the U.S. is still really trying to assess all of the key facts here. They know it was carried out by these radical Iran-backed militant groups, the U.S. said, operating in Syria and Iraq. And he promised to hold them all responsible to account. at a time and in a manner of our choosing, he said in that statement. So what that signals is that they still need to figure out a little bit more about then where they would potentially want to target some of these strikes. We know in the past, when the U.S. has carried out some of these retaliatory strikes, they have been in places to try to really degrade the weapons capability, for instance, of the Houthis, which we saw in the last couple of weeks or so. But they need to really determine the scope of who was responsible here, where they are keeping their assets, and how to carry that out in a manner that, of course, then is still safe for U.S. troops who are in the area, because that's a potential risk here as well for some kind of widening of this, Joe.
So meanwhile, Matt, you are in Israel. Let's talk about what's happening with the Israel-Hamas war. We know there were more ceasefire and hostage talks over the weekend involving the likes of Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. Any progress been made?
Yeah, really high-level talks. And, Joe, I can't tell you the progress has really been made. And, in fact, we heard from the White House ahead of time that there wasn't an imminent deal. We just heard from the Israelis that this was constructive, but that nothing has really come out of this, and they're not expecting any decision necessarily anytime soon. But, look, Joe, this meeting happened. It completed. And that alone is a sign of progress, because the hopes around freeing the remaining hostages have been so low that the fact that there is this political weight from the international community, from, as you mentioned, the U.S., Egypt, Qatar, and Israel, all of them huddling, trying to bring the parties together to meet in the middle and get these more than 100 hostages free, including 6 Americans. That is progress in itself. And we probably won't know more about this deal until there is a deal. Joe?
Monica, Matt talks about political weight. So, Monica, what can you tell us about this NBC News reporting that the Biden administration is considering using weapons deliveries as leverage over the Israeli government? What are we learning there?
So we know that since the war started, the U.S. has continued to supply weaponry to Israel, to pledge to really help Israel defend itself. That's something the president has said repeatedly. But now we know there are these conversations about using all of that support as leverage and trying to perhaps slow it down or make it clear to the Israeli government that that will slow down if they don't shift themselves into this lower intensity phase of fighting in Gaza and really take into account what has happened so far with the staggering civilian death toll and take more care in trying to avoid that and those kinds of casualties in the future. Now, we know that this is a message that's been delivered behind the scenes from the president and his top advisors to their counterparts to really try to take that message and heed those warnings. But so far, clearly, that hasn't worked. So there's a question now of what else potentially could be used here to see any kind of change in that dynamic, Joe.
All right. Monica and Matt, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it. Let's bring in Hagar Shamali, host of Oh My World on YouTube, also former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN, and former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon, joining us now for more analysis. Good to have you with us. So we know a little background here. In recent months, the U.S. has struck targets in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, responding to attacks on American forces to try and deter Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. But now we have yesterday's deadly drone attack in Jordan. So is the U.S. strategy for dealing with this working, or is this going to force the Biden administration to try and find a new approach? And if so, what could that be?
Right. Well, so the U.S. since after October 7th, the number one priority has been to prevent a war from escalating to something that was full scale, region wide. And they pursued this method of responding to attacks from these Iran-backed militant groups with limited strikes, with things that were controlled measures, things of that kind to avoid escalation. But clearly that policy has not worked. It has failed at deterring these Iran-backed militant groups from pursuing this. What those groups are trying to do, by the way, they are not trying to defend the Palestinians or even protest against what Israel is doing. They are trying to take advantage of an unstable situation and pursue more troublemaking, pursue more instability, and also they are trying to make a name for themselves. They have no purpose if it's not to fight. And so by goading the United States, by trying to provoke the United States into a war, they're trying to reel this big fish in that gives them this notoriety, something that they can use to recruit further, to get more financing, and so on. And so that's what they're trying to do. But unfortunately, yes, when you have a situation like that, it's very dangerous, precarious. And the thing that we kept saying was, if U.S. soldiers are killed, and that is what unfortunately has happened, it escalates this to another level, and the U.S. will have to respond in an extremely tough way, and I expect them to do so this week.
All right, we'll see what happens there. I do want to talk to you about the negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Over the weekend, Israel said significant gaps remain in those ceasefire negotiations, which would result in the swap of remaining hostages for a 2-month pause in fighting, but also said the talks were constructive. Do you see any reason for optimism here?
I do see reason for optimism. The reason is because the Israelis and Hamas have already agreed in principle on the ability to exchange hostages for Palestinian prisoners. They had a truce only a couple months ago. So that is something that is achievable. You also have pressure building on both sides, pressure from the hostages, the families of Israeli hostages inside Israel, pressuring the government to prioritize this. And you had a protest last week inside Gaza asking Hamas to release the captives because people there are sick of the fighting. And so given that pressure, I do expect something to come of this, but I do not expect a permanent ceasefire to be part of that deal.
Real quickly, let's talk about that NBC News reporting about the Biden administration discussing slowing down weaponry deliveries to Israel. Could that work?
A little bit. I think polls have shown across Israel that, unfortunately, that a desire for a two-state solution is low, even if U.S. aid were to stop. Now, U.S. aid is considerable. We provide $3.8 billion a year to Israel. That's 16% of Israel's defense budget. It is a large chunk, but it is not the only chunk. That said, we are the main funders of the Iron Dome, and so I do think we have the ability to twist their arm a little bit in this.
All right, Hagar Shamali, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We always appreciate your perspective on big stories like this. Now to another big story, the latest on the ongoing crisis at the southern border and an issue that's really intensifying on Capitol Hill. That's because on Sunday, House Republicans unveiled 2 articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. They allege he's failed to uphold the law and has breached the public trust. GOP lawmakers are arguing the impeachment push is justified because of the record high number of border crossings. This comes after President Biden announced on Friday he will vow to halt crossings at the border when it's overwhelmed if Congress passes a bipartisan immigration deal, giving him that authority. For the latest on all this, let's bring in NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin and NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Good morning to both of you. Julie, let's begin with you. So explain to us that the allegations House Republicans are using against Secretary Mayorkas ahead of this committee vote. What should we know about this?
Yeah, Joe, it's good to be with you. Let's take a step back real quick, because this is something that Republicans in the House, some at least, have tried to pursue for months and months and months, ever since they got the majority back in January. And it is a very slim majority that has only gotten more fragile as the months have gone on. But the reason this measure is before the House Homeland Security Committee, in part, is because when Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, tried to force a vote at the end of last year, Republicans actually demanded 8 of them that this matter be instead referred to the committee, which can then investigate this, that has jurisdiction over the border, over immigration, and certainly oversight over Mayorkas as well. So now we are at the point where the chairman of that committee, Mark Green, has sponsored these articles of impeachment. You talked about them at that top. They accuse Mayorkas of willfully failing to comply with the law that he is set to oversee at the border. The second one is breaching public trust by doing so. This is something that Republicans have a very fragile majority on, but something that they're going to pursue in a committee vote tomorrow at 10 a.m. If those articles are then processed by the committee, which there's a good chance they will be, with Republicans having majority, they will then head to the full House for a vote where there is an even slimmer margin for Speaker Johnson to work with. But certainly this is something Republicans are pursuing, especially in an election year, and certainly immigration has been a talking point across the Hill.
So, Julie, we got to learn a lot about the impeachment process during the Trump administration. Explain to us, though, how it works here, and in a divided Congress, how does an impeachment attempt even get off the ground?
Well, it's a really good question, because you have Democrats who are pushing back against this effort. Of course, there's also a separate impeachment effort of President Biden. So House Republicans have been busy in doing these impeachments, but they do have a very fragile majority. I mentioned some of those Republicans at the end of the year that wanted this matter referred to the Homeland Security Committee. Those are going to be the ones to pay attention to. And some of them have even said that no matter what happens, they're not going to vote to impeach Mayorkas. They think what he's done in terms of policy disagreements doesn't warrant those misdemeanors and high crimes that are required for impeachment. So they're going to be a group to watch on the floor. But certainly you also have Democrats who don't want this to happen. You have the Democratic-controlled Senate. So this impeachment inquiry is going to be dead on arrival in that chamber. I want to read you a little part of what Benny Thompson, who's the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee, had to say. He called this a sham impeachment. He said it was a political stunt and it was an effort by Republicans to score political points in an election year. And this is all happening, by the way, while Senate negotiators are working with Mayorkas to try and hammer out those finer sticking points in a deal we potentially expect to see text of in the coming days.
Julia, I want to bring you into the conversation. As we mentioned, a pretty notable announcement from President Biden late last week, vowing to halt border crossings if Congress passes legislation giving him the power to do so. The president supports this deal making its way through the Senate. What do we know about what's in the proposed deal, and what prompted the president to come out and make this vow?
Well, yeah, what's in the proposed deal would definitely increase the bar for asylum, making it harder for people to cross. And what they would hope is that they could turn more people back into Mexico before they even come into the United States. And what some of the Republicans are hoping is to try to deny the right to parole, whether that's people applying from their home country to come to the United States or people released in the United States as they await their court hearings. All of that's being discussed. We know the White House has moved really further to the right on this issue, especially since the president first came into office, even during these negotiations. And in part is because from what I'm hearing from people at DHS is they do want tougher border restrictions. They see this as an issue. You have record high border numbers in the month of December. We just got those. We know it decreased in January, but they're worried about them going up as they typically do each spring. And if they have record high border numbers going into the election, that could really be damaging for Biden. And so now we're seeing this incredibly strong statement. In fact, it echoes something Trump used to say. He was just going to shut down the border, not allow anyone else to cross. And of course, you're going to run into all kinds of issues that Trump did with that. He wasn't able to do that because you also have the international right to claim asylum. You have hundreds and thousands of people coming up and presenting themselves to Border Patrol. What do you do with those people if Mexico won't take them back? They're not from Mexico. Is that then Mexico's responsibility? But I think it's the idea of the statement and the sentiment behind it to show that he's really serious about this issue and to try to signal to Democrats on the Hill that he's ready to go as far as he can on this issue.
Because this is going to be such a huge issue in this election year. Julia, real quickly while we have you, President Biden's top migration advisor in the National Security Council is set to depart the White House this upcoming week. What should we know about this move?
Yeah, that's Katie Tobin. She's really been a behind-the-scenes person doing a lot of these policies. There was actually just a Washington Post headline that said, Biden's done more on immigration than Trump, it just hasn't worked. But a lot of those policies, she has been behind. She's led a delegation where they came up with this new framework with agreements with Mexico and Los Angeles. She was able to be part of the transition away from Title 42, those COVID-19 era restrictions, into this new era of asylum restrictions that, obviously haven't kept the numbers down at the border, but was a framework for what the Biden administration wanted to do to open up more legal pathways for people to apply from their home countries and not be able to apply for asylum as easily when they cross the southern border illegally. She's done a lot. She's been there for 3 years. I don't have any information that her departure is a sign that things aren't working or that she's frustrated. 3 years is actually a pretty typical time for someone to be in a job like that. But yeah, I think that this just leaves the White House in an even more vulnerable position as they try to get something done on this issue.
All right, Julie and Julia, the name of a great movie and also a great team joining us this morning. Thanks both for joining us. Appreciate it. Convicted killer Alec Murdaugh will soon find out if he'll be granted a new murder trial for the shooting deaths of his wife Maggie and his youngest son Paul. The disgraced attorney currently serving 2 life sentences for the murders. Now, months after his conviction, the defense alleges that the clerk of court, Becky Hill, tampered with that South Carolina jury. They allege Hill asked jurors not to believe Murdaugh's testimony or any evidence presented by his defense. Hill denies those allegations. Murdaugh's appeal of his murder conviction has been suspended pending the outcome of his request for a new trial. Time now for your morning news now weather forecast. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with what to expect this week. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Great to see you. And we are looking at a really quiet week, especially today. We're starting out quiet. We haven't been able to say that for quite some time. So we're looking at sunny and dry weather in a lot of the country, at least in the portions of the Gulf Coast states into the South Central states. The biggest weather story will be record highs throughout the middle of the country into the west. We're looking at temperatures anywhere from 10, even 30 degrees above normal. We do have some snow showers, lingering snow showers in portions of the interior parts of the Northeast. That should be moving out, but we will be seeing snow showers with a quick moving clipper system throughout the Great Lakes, also the Appalachians, although it's not going to melt much. We're going to see at most an inch in some spots, a few showers in portions of the Pacific Northwest, but really tomorrow the west becomes wet once again. So as we go throughout Wednesday, we're looking at that clipper system moving off to portions of the mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas, and we'll see rain there. It's going to be light rain, a few record highs in the Midwest, also the Northern Plains and two portions of the Central Plains. We could break a couple records today, too, even 24 records with daytime highs. And there's that western storm. We're looking at some heavy rain along the coast. We do have some flooding concerns on Wednesday and even some mountain snow. But look at the rest of the country. We are quiet Wednesday, still sunshine throughout the New England, mid-Atlantic, South Central states, also portions of the Intermountain West. That changes Friday in the Intermountain West because we're going to see showers and storms kind of overtaking the Intermountain West, the Southwest. Also, the coast still remaining wet with that coastal rain, mountain snow. And we're looking at some showers in portions of the South Central states. February warmth continues in parts of the Midwest into the Great Lakes. We're looking at temperatures above normal still. And then snow showers into New England and the interior parts of the Northeast. So let's talk about that spring preview because we are looking at temperatures into the mid-70s in Los Angeles today. 8 degrees above normal, near 80 in Phoenix. That's almost 10 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. 70s in Dallas, too, 60s in Wichita, and we're looking at 41 degrees in Chicago. That's 10 degrees above average. That January warmth stays in place tomorrow. We're going to see it moving a little to the east as well. Little Rock in the 60s, Wichita, too, in the 60s, and we'll be right around 60 degrees in Huntsville. So those well above average temperatures, Joe, continue late week, too. We're looking at temperatures still in the 60s in Wichita by Thursday. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you. Too early to ask you about the Super Bowl forecast. We'll get to that sometime next week. All right, thank you. So the Super Bowl matchup is now set after two thrilling conference championship games yesterday. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're heading to their fourth Super Bowl in the last 5 seasons after beating the Baltimore Ravens 17-10 in the AFC Championship. The superstar duo of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce gave the Chiefs just enough offense to pull off the win in front of a very loud Baltimore crowd. Kansas City looking to become the first team to repeat as champs since the New England Patriots did it nearly 20 years ago. They will take on the San Francisco 49ers, who came back from a 17-point halftime deficit, defeating the underdog Detroit Lions 34-31. The Super Bowl matchup, by the way, between San Francisco and Kansas City, it's a rematch of the big game in 2020, which was won by the Chiefs. Super Bowl 58 will take place on February 11th in Las Vegas.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.